Please subscribe to hear more Cryptid Tales. If you like the story you heard, give us a thumbs up and feel free to leave us a comment. If you'd like to hear your own cryptid encounter on Cryptid Tales, send us an email at cryptidtalesmail@gmail.com. Shh. It's out there. Can you hear it? That thing's been out there all night, stomping around, throwing stuff at the cabin. It's like being in a nightmare you can't wake up from. What? There it goes again. It's been staying just out there inside the tree line, keeping to the shadows, waiting me out. But I ain't going nowhere, and I'm going to make sure that thing stays out there, where it belongs. They said I was crazy up here hallucinating, but I knew what I had heard, what I had seen. I tried telling them, but they don't believe me. Guess I don't blame them. I didn't believe it either till I seen it for myself. But now I am stuck in this predicament, with nobody else to blame but myself. As much as I'd like to, I can't even blame that monster out there. Not really. It was my own ignorance and stupidity that got me here. It's just trying to survive. And I understand that. That's what we're all trying to do, I reckon. But if it has to come down to it, me or that thing out there, well, I'll do what I have to do. You hear that? Yeah, quiet. What's he doing? There he is, right there, between those two trees. Not much light out but the moon and the stars, but that's enough to see its eyes light up. Those dang eyes, that's what got me spooked in the first place. Just a few weeks ago, I had no idea these Sasquatch things were real. Heck, I practically grew up in the woods, and I ain't never seen any signs of them being out there. Never knew anyone that did. At first, I thought a bear was getting into my stuff. I mean, it did seem kind of strange. Bears usually tear up a place pretty good, but this one was different acting. It just seemed like it was digging through stuff and scattering it about. A few food items were missing, and the trash was gone through real good. I mean, what would you think? A bear, am I right? I mean, what can get a door open? Raccoons can't reach the doorknob. A human would have taken my gun and a few other trinkets I got they might be able to pawn. Not too long after that, the thumping started. Real late at night, I'd be asleep or sitting here reading my book, and something would slap the side of the cabin real hard. Hard enough to make you jump. I'd run outside and nothing. Everything would be still and quiet. It went on like that every 2 or 3 nights. I didn't know what to think. Finally, my nerves had enough, and one night, right when it happened, I just ran outside screaming and cussing. Good thing there ain't no people anywhere near here, I guess. Otherwise, they'd probably have called the law on me. But after I did that, things settled down. Or at least I thought they did. A week or so had gone by, and nothing had happened since that night I ran out the door screaming like a banshee. I had just woke up after dozing off in my chair. It was late, not real sure what time of night it was, but it was well dark and the moon was high. I opened my eyes and sat there for a minute, collecting myself before moving to the bed. As I sat there, I heard what sounded like heavy, slow footsteps on the front porch. Starting out there at the far end and coming towards the door. I'd be a liar if I said it didn't startle me a bit. I could hear the boards on the porch creaking with each step. Someone was on my porch, but at the time, I couldn't really wrap my head around it. I had just woken up, like I said, but also, I couldn't figure out why anyone would be sneaking around way out here at some old cabin. Steps got to the door. At this point, I started thinking it might be best to grab my gun. But the steps, to my surprise, didn't stop at the door. They walked on past. Whoever or whatever was out there was fixing to walk right by the front window. My mind started predicting what I was about to see. It was dark outside, but I figured I'd still be able to see enough to tell what it was. Maybe it was that bear that broke in and took my food. I watched the window as this thing stepped in front of it. The window went completely dark. I couldn't see the trees or nothing else. The footsteps had stopped. I strained to focus on what I was seeing. It moved slightly to one side, and I could make out the line of what looked like an arm, but there was hair all over it. Then, way up at the top of the window pane, I saw those eyes. Those two glowing orbs in the darkness. I've seen eye shine of just about every critter out here, I'd imagine. But this shine was brighter and bigger than anything I had witnessed. I guess it was the size of the eyes that made it look that way. Each one was about the size of a good-sized plum. Whatever it was, when I saw those eyes, it changed things. I couldn't move a finger. I couldn't breathe. Hell, I couldn't even blink. I ain't felt that scared since I was a youngin'. Then, quicker than a bolt of lightning, it was gone. Before I could realize it, I was staring out an empty window again. I stood up halfway in a panic and halfway in a daze. When my angle changed from sitting to standing, I could see fog on the window from the thing's breath. I went for my gun, banging my damn knee against the coffee table, scooting it across the floor. When I did that, I heard the thing take off running back across the porch. Boom, boom, boom. I'd only heard the steps, but I could feel them through the floorboards of the cabin. I grabbed my gun and an old Ithaca double-barrel 12-gauge, unlatched the door, and yanked it open. When I got the door open, I could hear the footfalls this thing was making as it ran straight away towards the woods. I stepped out on the porch with my gun already on my shoulder, and without even thinking, pulled both triggers. That was my mistake. Now, I don't know if I hit the thing. I doubt I did, as I wasn't even aiming as much as I was just pointing towards it. I'm not sure the buckshot I had loaded would even make this thing flinch, let alone drop it. I ain't never seen anything like it before. I can tell you this much. It didn't break a stride after I pulled the triggers, but I do sure think I pissed it off. Hell, I know I did. When it hit the tree line, it reached just above its head and slapped a limb right off the tree. The limb went flying end over end until it smacked against another tree and fell to the ground. Now, I know this might sound crazy, but I think this thing did that on purpose. Not out of anger, but with a reason. I think it was trying to distract me in case I was going to shoot again. Now, the fellas in town at the gas station I told this to just laughed at me. But they thought the whole story was made up in my head, either intentionally or not. But the reason I think it did that on purpose was because it got my attention for just a second. I took my eyes off it when I saw that limb flying, and in that short couple seconds, that thing disappeared from sight completely. Now, I know it was dark, but it wasn't too dark to see anything. I had seen it just fine up until then, but it was gone. No sound, no nothing. It was like everything had gone still. Then, from somewhere out there, in the dark cover of the woods, it sounded like the gates of hell themselves had opened up. This thing let out this ungodly roar that I could feel in my chest. My hair might have blown back if I had any left. That roar seemed like it lasted forever, and by the time it was done, my entire body was shaking like a leaf, and I felt like I was going to puke on my boots. I didn't sleep anymore that night. The next morning I got up and drove into town. That's when I told the old boys at the gas station what had happened. These guys lived out there their entire lives, and I was hoping one of them might have some answers. But like I said, all they had was jokes and a good laugh at my expense. When I got back to the cabin, laying across the road going to the place was a tree. Now, it's no big deal for a tree to fall up here. In any other time, I wouldn't have thought all that much of it. But this time, maybe I just got it in my own head. But this tree wasn't dead. It was still green, and it looked like something had shoved it over across the road to my place. Was it that thing, that Sasquatch? I wrapped a chain around it and pulled it out of the way. The whole time I kept looking for that thing to be standing there somewhere, but I never saw it if it was. When I got to the cabin, I walked over and looked at where it had slapped that limb off the tree. I couldn't believe it. That limb had been close to 9 or 10 foot off the ground, but it had just barely reached up above its head to slap it. I walked up on the porch and stood in front of the window. I guess a person doesn't realize these things until something like this happens, like how high up your window goes. I stood there looking up about where I saw the thing's eyes shining, probably a foot to a foot and a half above my own head. I looked around the yard for tracks, but couldn't find anything more than an impression here and there. That night, I was able to fall asleep with the peace of mind thinking that there was no way this thing would come back knowing I had a gun, and that I would use it, which I kept next to the bed that night. I have no words to describe the emotions I was going through when I woke up that night to the sound of the beast beating on the side of my cabin. I guess it was a combination of both being completely terrified and angry at the same time. I jumped up and grabbed the gun. The beating continued until I yelled. Then once again, that sudden and eerie silence. Then something hit the porch roof. I walked over to the window and looked out towards the woods. A rock about the size of my fist came sailing through the air, hitting the cabin a few feet from the window I was standing at before bouncing across the porch. This went on all night, the rock throwing, the beating on the back and side of the cabin, and every now and then it would even scream at me from the woods, a god-awful scream that sounded like a man screaming with rage, but much louder than any man could make without tearing his throat up. That was 3 nights ago. The Sasquatch has been back every night since, throwing rocks and tree limbs, smacking the cabin, running across the porch, making sure I don't fall asleep, wearing me down until, well, I don't reckon I want to think about what happens then. Part of me just wants to pack it up and leave, let him win. That monster out there pushed more trees down in the road blocking me in. I guess I could try hiking out on foot, if that thing would even let me leave. But I just can't do it. This is my place, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let that thing run me out of it. I know, foolish thoughts of a stubborn man. But what am I supposed to do? Just let him have it? Never come back? I'm afraid it's too late for that. What kind of animal torments a man like that? That thing out there, that Sasquatch, it ain't an animal, no more than you or me. I don't know what it is, a monster, I guess. It's not even supposed to be real. There. Listen. You hear it? Footsteps on the porch. Step. 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 I think it's at the door. Oh no. No. Look at the knob. Is it turning? It's trying to turn the knob. Please don't let this thing get in here. I can hear the knob rattling. If it opens that door, I'm pulling the trigger. Either it drops or... I just heard the click of the latch. The door's starting to open. Hide. My incident happened over a series of days, 2 years ago, in Ojai, California. Usually about 5:30 a.m. in the morning. I was driving a large van on a 2-lane road through a canyon with a creek bed on my way to pick up my special needs passengers to take them to school. Suddenly, a mature deer came out of the woods and ran right alongside of me, as if to get away from something scarier than people. As I took my foot off the gas, I slowed and then seemed to speed up, which I found odd. Further on, an apparent young man came to the edge of the road on my left, smiling, where the creek was. I stopped on a dime to let him pass to the other side, a steep cliff going up. Instead of seeing him pass, all I could see was apparent fur across 2/3 of my windshield, and my driver door window went black. It was dark outside, and I could see the hair/fur because of my headlights. Then, in a swift motion, the fur went to nearly straight up the cliff and disappeared, with an owl being knocked to the ground from its perch. The only way a human being could have ascended that steep incline would have been with a rope with a hook on the end and pulling himself up. But these apparent animals went up like the wind. What I later figured happened is, the 6-foot person I stopped the car for must have been a young Bigfoot, and the 2 adult Bigfoots escorted it up the hill on my right for protection. The one in the front of the van was so tall I couldn't even make out a shoulder. The one on the driver door was no doubt keeping me from stepping out. Bigfoot crossing guards, or I witnessed a human abduction. When I returned from the trip, I noticed an 18-inch muddy handprint on the back of my van, and it must have been made when I was accelerating, even though my foot was off the gas. I had apparently intruded upon their hunt, and he was pushing me down the road to get me out of the way. On a subsequent visit, I would roll my window down and whistle in the direction of the creek as I drove by. I did this for a week, until one day I turned the corner to that spot, and there was a broken off tree in the middle of the road, which made the hair on my neck rise. Upon inspection, later in the daylight, I saw that it had been broken off 50 feet from the road, 8 feet up the tree, and carried, since there was no drag marks. It was a healthy tree, 10 inches in diameter. On Christmas Day, I went out to look for footprints. The moment I opened my car door and stepped out, there was a huge sound of wood bashing on one of the hundreds of the oak trees opposite the creek that echoed all over the area. As I said, it would be extremely difficult for a man to go up that very steep incline in those oak trees. I went to the creek area, but felt I should not venture further, due to the warning knocks from the sentinel Bigfoot. There had to be one or more of them right where I was. I got in my car and left. There were 3 huge bashing wood knocks, 3 at a time, that echoed everywhere while I was there. One morning, when I was picking up one of the kids located directly over the hill from that creek, there was a huge wood knock in the woods behind that house. They know me, what I look like, and are warning me. The interest of that Bigfoot in this particular house came to mind. There are stacked rocks all over the yard at this house. Very carefully balanced. The owner lady told me she did it herself, but sounded very unbelievable. Why would someone make 50 piles of carefully balanced rocks in their front yard? It's my opinion that she has developed a relationship with a Bigfoot, or perhaps more than one. I asked a homeless person if he knew anything about Bigfoot in the area, and he told me that he was aware of a family of 3 living in the creek area. I saw 3. He told me that one of his friends tried sleeping under the bridge at the creek, and his mangled and torn up body was later found, having been dragged out from under the bridge. The sheriff said it was a bear or mountain lion, but the homeless guy said no. The body was too severely shredded for that to be true. A lady actor from the local playhouse said she was doing her usual Saturday night traveling through that creek area after a show, when without warning, the car slid into the next lane. She stopped and nothing was there. She later went to the gas station and looked for dents or scratches, and there weren't any. She makes no conjecture as to what happened and by who. One morning, after the tree in the road, I looked over to the creek area and saw 2 red glowing eyes, very wide apart, impossibly high off the ground. Could have been 10 foot tall. Deer commonly come darting out from the darkness towards my vehicle before sunrise. This is unnatural and a sure sign of seeking protection. I have tried to get any Bigfoot searching teams across the nation to come and find Bigfoot's lair, and they have shown zero interest, and I've been snubbed.